very much. Welcome, everybody. This is the regular City Council meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. It is Wednesday, March 17, 2021 at 6 p.m. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Councilmember Hinsey. Here. Councilmember Lyons.
Here.
Councilmember Moscow.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, thank you. And I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So now we will go to our special presentations and proclamations today. The first one is Proclamation of Appreciation for Scripps healthcare workers. And I will read the proclamation and then I will hand it over to two people, Jessica Tallman and Chris Parker, who are two staff members who were integral in the care of COVID patients. And I see them on camera there. So I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. And if we were in person, I would be handing the proclamation to you and then you could say a few words. So this is a proclamation which begins with a couple whereases. So whereas the city of Encinitas and surrounding areas have faced a significant number of medical emergencies from the COVID-19 virus. Whereas Scripps Hospital medical personnel and staff are on the front lines locally in the treatment and care of individuals who have become seriously ill with the COVID virus. Whereas Scripps Hospital medical personnel and staff have and are presently exhibiting extraordinary dedication and skill in meeting this extreme emergency through treatment and care of seriously ill people, both locally and throughout San Diego County. And therefore be it resolved that I, Catherine Blakespear, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with the entire Encinitas City Council, want to express our deepest appreciation, gratitude, and heartfelt thanks to the Scripps Hospital Encinitas medical personnel and supporting staff for their dedication and help in this medical emergency and health crisis. So with that, I will hand it to you.
Thank you. Hi, Honorable Mayor and members of the Encinitas City Council. My name is Jessica Tallman. I'm a registered nurse here at Scripps Encinitas. And on behalf of Scripps, we want to thank you for your thoughtfulness. It's a tremendous honor for us to accept this proclamation on behalf of all Scripps healthcare workers who have been responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're calling in this evening from Scripps Encinitas, but we have many other Scripps employees who are tuned into the webcast right now. We know it's been a challenging time for the entire community, but especially for our teams on the front lines of the pandemic. So thank you.
Hi, and I'm Chris Parker, respiratory therapist here at Scripps Encinitas. We are grateful for this honor and for the acknowledgement of the unique challenges we have faced in our hospitals over the past year. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank Encinitas community for the outpourings of support you have shown to us through your signs, kind remarks in the community, and through the deliveries to the hospital. Thank you for this honor.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all those people socially distanced behind you and to everybody else who's tuning in and everybody who's been working so hard. We're so grateful to have Scripps Hospital in our city. You're our hospital and we embrace all that you do. And we're so thrilled that we can recognize you today. So thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then, Mayor, we do have one public speaker on this item.
Okay, great. Let's hear a public speaker.
And that is Nancy Perry Sheridan. Let me see if she's on. Oh, I do not see her. And then I guess we do not have a speaker on this item.
Okay, well, we'll let you go back to the critical work you're doing and say thank you very much. You're of course welcome to watch the City Council, but we're going to move on to the next item. And if Nancy appears and wants to comment on this item, we'll take her out of order. Okay, so the next thing that we have is number 4B, which is overview of the San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, which is CLERB, by Paul Parker, the CLERB Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear, Deputy Mayor Krantz, Council Members Lyons, Hinsey, and Mosca. Let me try to share my screen. First off, thank you for having me. As the fairly new executive officer for the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, one of my main goals is to get out into the community as best as possible, especially during the pandemic, but to get out and get the word out about what it is we do. We've been around for 30 years and not many people know who we are and what we do. And since you folks contract with the Sheriff's Department, I think it was a good idea. And I really appreciate the time to come by and just talk to you about our 2020 annual report, give you an overview of what we do, and then some statistics from Encinitas. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can you folks see that? Good to go?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
All right,
Thank you.
very well. So as I said, first off, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board is an 11-member board, and they're chosen by the Board of Supervisors, 2 from each supervisorial district, and then with 1 floater. So at this point, District 5 has the floater for clerk right now with the 11 total members. Again, we've been around for 30 years, and since nobody really knows, again, what we do, I just wanted to just throw this slide up here. Here's what we do. We were formed, like I said, back in 1990 to review, receive, and investigate citizen complaints. So we'd have to have signed complaints. People have to put it in writing, signed under penalty of perjury against sworn members of the Sheriff's Department or Probation Department. So when I say sworn members, it doesn't mean medical staff. It doesn't mean any professional staff, dispatchers, things along those lines. Only the sworn members, the deputies that are out there providing the law enforcement services. We have jurisdiction over several categories: excessive force, discrimination, false arrest, false reporting, any kind of criminal conduct, improper discharge of firearms, illegal search and seizure, and misconduct investigations, which basically are procedural violations, improper conduct, things along those lines. Again, we can only investigate those categories of complaint with a signed complaint. Number 2, as you'll see going around clockwise on the chart here, review and investigate deaths. This is huge. CLRB is responsible for conducting independent and impartial investigations into any deaths that may have arisen out of the actions of sworn members of the Sheriff's Department or Probation Department. So that includes any in-custody death in any of the detention facilities, but it also includes deaths that may occur in the patrol function, if, you know, whether it's a vehicle pursuit or a barricade situation or a deputy involved shooting, things along those lines. We can investigate those incidents without a signed complaint at all. We automatically invoke jurisdiction and conduct an independent investigation. We also obviously prepare investigative reports. We put together an annual report. This is the earliest we've had our annual report put together, and it is that serves the basis of my presentation for you tonight. And we also recommend policy and procedures to both the Sheriff's Department and Probation Department. Many times they're case specific. So something that we're investigating, we think, you know what, maybe the Sheriff's Department can do this to provide a better service to its community members. And we make that recommendation. More often than not, they don't have to accept, the Sheriff's Department does not have to accept our recommendations, but more often than not, they do. Those recommendations are advisory only, but again, we put it in writing to them. They put it in writing back to us that they're going to accept it or not accept our recommendations and why. So we think that that's a huge function of the civilian oversight of law enforcement that we provide. There are a couple other new cases that we can look at based on the Board of Supervisors' actions over the last couple of months, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. For the longest time, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, a county office, was part of the public safety group, the county's public safety group. We believe that created, it didn't necessarily look like there was an appearance of independence if we were in the same group as the Sheriff's Department and Probation Department. So recently we were moved to the county's Finance and General Government group so that we have more independence. And so it appears that we have more independence with no allegations that the Sheriff or Probation Department are any way influencing us because, you know, looking for money or trying to control our money or anything like that. We also revised our CLRB member nomination and selection process. We're getting the community more involved. Before, the executive officer was primarily involved with selecting our CLRB members, which really isn't appropriate considering that I worked for them. I shouldn't be selecting my own boss. At this point now, it's fully on the Board of Supervisors, the respective supervisor for each district, along with the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer of the Finance and General Government group. Really, it's those two to play the biggest role in choosing our CLRB members now. We only have one vacancy right now, and that's in District 1, which is the South Bay. And we don't have any vacancies coming up in District 3, for the foreseeable future. We actually, for the next slide, for the next two categories, I'm going to put it over to the next slide. I mentioned that death investigations we can do without a signed complaint. Well, based on an action of the Board of Supervisors effective in December of this past year, we now can look at these three categories: discharge of firearm, use of force resulting in great bodily injury, and any use of force at a First Amendment protected event or a protest. Those we can now look at without receiving a signed complaint. And thus far, we're investigating 1 discharge of firearm and 4 uses of force resulting in great bodily injury just since December. We have not received any use of force complaints, or not complaints, but any kind of word that there was use of force at a protest or anything like that since December that we could look at. So because that has grown our authority, we'd only had 3 investigators, but now we'll be hiring 3 more, so we're gonna have 6. We promoted a supervisor from within to get our cases done in a more timely fashion. CLRB, if you've heard anything about CLRB, it's usually been negative. We had to discharge 22 death cases a couple of years ago because they were not timely completed. We're always right up against the 1-year completion clock that we have. And I contend that that's because we only have 3 investigators to look at the number of cases we have, and we'll talk about that. So based on this workload study and the new authority and the jail inspections we'll be doing and things like that, we got the additional 3 staff members. But interestingly enough, based on, this is our last 10 years worth of cases. This is with hardly any community outreach, hardly any over the last several, maybe 5 to 7 years. You'll notice that last year, we dropped 23% in the number of cases. We believe, we can't really prove it, but we believe that that's because of COVID. We're curious as to the Sheriff's Department's numbers and the Probation Department's numbers for last year. But as you can see, for the 3 years prior, we were averaging 152 cases a year, and that's what we anticipated last year. With our new cases, our new authority, we're anticipating almost 200 cases a year, which is why we needed the additional staff and why we're going to be able to provide better service once we get that staff. In our 2020 annual report, you'll see the breakdown. Again, we have responsibility for the jails, and we have responsibility for law enforcement services, probation, and court services. The breakdown here is pretty much the same as it is every year. Probation department is usually about 10%, but sheriff law enforcement services, which is who's providing law enforcement services for you, anywhere from 40 to 48% every year. Let's break that down a little bit more. So what are we talking about? So last year, and then I'm going to compare this to Encinitas numbers, but last year there were 58% of our allegations that we received were for misconduct, 5% for death. Look at the excessive force, 14% total for the entire county that we have jurisdiction over. 14% of the new complaints were for excessive force. And that's important because if you look at the best I could do for you folks, because I wanted to make this applicable to you as well. You're in the North Coastal Station. I think everybody knows that. You're North Coastal Station, Sheriff's Patrol Station, which includes, I think, Del Mar, Solana Beach, and Encinitas. So I tried to put numbers together for the last 5 years. Out of the last 5 years, your patrol area, quite frankly, has been the busiest for CLRB, with 37 total complaints over the last 5 years. However, for the last 2 or 3 years, the case numbers have fallen pretty dramatically for your area. Back in 16, 17, 18, there were a lot of cases, but now over the last couple of years, they've fallen. Out of the last 5 years, there were 116 total allegations. So again, you'll see that the 59% of them are misconduct, very similar to our last year's stats for the county, for the entire county. But what I really wanted to point out, and it just blew me away when I put these stats together, only 2% were for excessive force. That's amazing. I mean, only 2 allegations out of 116 for excessive force, where you'll see for the county last year, there were 14% were for excessive force. So I don't, again, these are just the statistics that CLRB has generated over the last 5 years. The people that knew about us reached out to us and made complaints. But I found that to be astounding that it was, quite frankly, only 2% of the allegations in your respective patrol station. For our last year annual report, we had 9 discrimination complaints. 6 of them were racial. For your patrol area over the last 5 years, only 5, 3 of which were racial. The 2 that say other, basically, they didn't follow through. So really, we don't know what they were alleging. They did not follow through with a signed complaint. So only 3 racial discrimination. I mean, 1 is too many, but over 5 years, 3 racial discrimination allegations in your patrol area. Excessive force, as we talked about, this is last year, 2020, just for the entire county that we provide oversight service, the areas we provide oversight services for, which are the Sheriff's Department has 9 contract cities and then all the unincorporated areas plus the 7 detention facilities. There were 45 excessive force allegations. You'll see kicks and OC spray, carotid restraint. We shouldn't have any more of those since the Sheriff's Department has banned the carotid restraint as of last June. But interestingly enough, again, for North Coastal Station for the last 5 years, only 2 excessive force allegations. 1 was other, which means it was a combination. I'm not certain what the combination was. Our data didn't break that down for me. It could have been, OC spray plus kicks or something like that. But then unspecified was simply a complainant who failed to follow through and didn't tell us what he or she was alleging had occurred. So again, I find that to be very impressive numbers for a patrol area station as big as North Coastal. Our annual report on misconduct allegations were about 193. Most of those are procedurally related. And again, it comes for your North Coastal Station over the last 5 years, again, procedure is number 1. So these are the ones where people are alleging that the deputies didn't follow any kind of policy or some kind of policy, or they were discourteous or not discourteous. Discourteous has its own allegations, but basically any procedural violation would go into this category, and you'll see a large percentage are procedural. Last year, we closed, out of the 139 cases that we closed, we fully investigated 61. We summarily dismissed 6, which were cases that we didn't have jurisdiction over, but we received a signed complaint on. More often than not, that's medical staff. And then get this, because of our staffing, I believe because of our staffing, 48 of the cases, they alleged there was misconduct, but they never followed through with a signed complaint, and CLERB didn't have the staffing and didn't pursue those 48 different complainants that could have provided a different story, could have really, maybe there are systemic issues, but we just don't know because we let those other complainants get away based on staffing. We hope to end that this year. So I mentioned the policy recommendations that CLERB did last year. We did 12, and again, advisory only, but many of the policy recommendations, some of them dealt with including retaliation and sexual harassment and sexual identity in the Sheriff's Department discrimination policy, which they implemented, require activation of body-worn camera, include medical emergencies and death in the inmate status reports and their information system. They accepted that as well. There are still out of the 12, there's still about 5 that are outstanding, still under the review by the department. 15 new death investigations. And again, if you've been following the media at all, there's a conflict. There's conflicting data. The Sheriff's Department says that they have a rate of deaths in custody at a certain rate. The San Diego Union Tribune published a series last year, I believe it was last year, that indicates the rate is higher than what the Sheriff's Department is saying. So just real quickly, before I tell you how we waded into this, we had 15 new death investigations last year that were opened with us. 12 were from the detention facilities alone, and out of those 12, 5 were drug related, all of them related to fentanyl in the jail, all of them. 4 were natural, 1 was COVID. There were 2 suicides in custody and 1 homicide in custody. Now, there was also an out of custody one who had been released from custody, but it looks like it's probably a drug related death. He had been released from custody and died in a hospital. There was 1 deputy involved shooting in the Court Services Bureau, and there was 1 drug related death on patrol in Vista. So those are the 15 death investigations that we opened last year. I can tell you thus far this year, I think we've already opened 5 or 6. 1 was pursued, a couple of barricade ones, 1 in custody. So the deaths are there. And because of this conflicting data, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board has kind of waded into this, and we're going to conduct our own independent analysis. We're going to have to bring people in to know how to do this, but we're going to conduct our independent analysis and see what we believe the numbers are. And we don't know where they'll fall. Maybe it'll be more in line with the sheriff, maybe more in line with the UT, or totally skewed from both. We don't know. But that's our number 1 priority for this year, in addition to outreach. As you'll see, that's why I'm here tonight. I want to talk to anybody and everybody I can about the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board and the benefit that it does bring as an independent, impartial body that will be properly staffed, will be able to investigate cases timely and perhaps assist the probation and sheriff's department with the services that they provide to their citizens and the community members and visitors to those communities. So that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to do at least 1 or 2 of those a month. And one of the things that CLERB has never done, or take it back, hasn't done very much, is to reach out. Not only haven't they done community outreach very much, they certainly haven't done it to underrepresented communities or communities of color. That's going to be a focus of mine as well. Body-worn camera usage, our Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board members were concerned that there was a systemic issue with body-worn camera, that the deputies either were not turning them on, or they was not getting retained, or they were not, turning them off when they shouldn't have been. Thus far, our analysis has revealed no negative systemic issue. It looks like body-worn camera, for the most part, is being used as the Sheriff's Department wants it to be used. We talked about the death investigations. We talked about the subcommittee that we formed to look at the independent death, to do an independent analysis of deaths. And finally, out of the number of cases we do, last year we had 12 allegations that we sustained, which means we found that the Sheriff's Department personnel did violate policy or did violate something that they should not have. So that's about 8% of our total investigated cases. The deputies have every right to appeal those cases and those findings to the County Civil Service Commission. And one case involving 3 sustained findings is being appealed as we speak. And as far as next year goes, what I'd like to do is, again, continue the community outreach, hopefully try to implement an early warning system so that the Sheriff's Department has an early warning system of maybe some deputies that may be having some issues depending on our data and the complaints that we're receiving. We'd like to also begin to break down the demographics of our folks who die and our folks who are alleging complaints, and the demographics of the deputies that they're alleging misconduct on. We're going to conduct our jail inspections, hopefully after the pandemic. We'll conduct an analysis of the new areas of authority, and again, the community outreach. But ultimately, we want to maximize our transparency within our current statute and case law and fully implement the Board of Supervisors' directed expansion of our authority while getting out into the community. So with that, I tried to give you a lot of information, but also be respectful of your time. That concludes my presentation. Does anybody, are there any questions?
Yes, well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we may have a few hands here. The Deputy Mayor has his hand up, but before you go, I'd just like to ask if we do have public comments on this item.
No, we do not.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Krantz?
Yes, thank you. I appreciated getting the annual report and read it with interest, and the timing of having you here tonight is perfect. Several questions. One, the numbers that you're talking about, they represent incidents that are related to the Sheriff's Department's contract cities. Is that correct?
The 9 contract cities plus all of the unincorporated areas.
Unincorporated areas. So you have nothing to do with complaints against Carlsbad Police Department or Oceanside Police Department or Escondido or San Diego. It's just those contract cities. That's good to know for contextual reasons. And District 3 has an appointee, a member of the board?
District 3 has 2.
2, and how are they selected? You said that you don't expect any openings. Are there no term limits and
There are the board members can serve 2 years, or I'm sorry, 2 terms of 3 years each. So at this point, the representatives from District 3 are currently in their first term, I believe. So it'll be up to Supervisor Lawson-Remer as to whether or not she wants to extend them when they expire. One of them may be expiring next June. They run fiscal year to fiscal year. But we don't have anything on the horizon for that. So that they're selected by the district supervisor in conjunction with the county's finance and general government group, deputy chief administrative officer. They'll make that selection.
And you have an investigative role. I'm assuming you investigate and then make a presentation to the full board. Is that how it works?
That's exactly how it works, Deputy Mayor. We have our investigative staff. We recommend findings to the board. The board can take our recommendations just like the Board of Supervisors, and they can say, thank you for that, but we want to do this. But our reports are forwarded to them with our rationales and all of our investigative foundation for them to make the determination whether they accept staff's recommendation or go it on their own. And I would say, and again, you always hear this number, 99% of the time, but it's about 99% of the time they go with staff's recommendation.
What is the relationship with between CLRB and the Internal Affairs Department?
Zero, which is why the civilian oversight model is looked at as an independent and impartial, outside of the department completely. We don't share information. They don't share information with us, and the only thing that we would share with them is whatever we release to the public.
Well, what triggers the two different investigations? So, in other words, are there parallel investigations if there's a complaint against an officer?
There could be upwards of 3 investigations. It could be somebody could have filed a complaint against the officer, so that would be an internal affairs investigation. There could be a criminal investigation against the officer conducted by the department, and there could be, if somebody filed a complaint with us, we could be doing our own independent investigation. And sometimes the sheriff's department, when they get wind of something, they may just automatically kick it over to internal affairs without waiting for somebody to sign a complaint to internal affairs. But for us, with the exception of those 4 categories, we have to wait for the signed complaint. So again, to answer your question, it could be up to 3 investigations occurring at once.
And my last question to the role of each jurisdiction in complaints against contract deputies or contract officers. Do you think it's appropriate for a local jurisdiction to have their own board or committee or commission of some sort that is a place for citizens in our city to come and say, hey, here's my beef, and then it gets kicked around a little bit at this level? Or do you think it's necessary for it to immediately go to for your investigation?
I think that any avenue a community member would have would be worth having. Any avenue for them to take. So to answer your question, yeah, if there's something that a local municipality would want to implement to somehow screen cases or maybe be a first stop for them or just another option for them, I'm all in with that. I think the more options you give folks and more independent and impartial options, the better for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hinsey.
Thanks for taking the time to be here tonight and to present this to us. It's really interesting to hear about what CLRB does. And as you stated, I think many of us didn't know that CLRB existed prior to the summer's events. I'm curious to know, it seems that a lot of these signed complaints, for it to advance, it has to be signed by somebody, which means they have to put their identity forward in public. But is it possible that if somebody wanted to remain anonymous, that a signed complaint could be filed on behalf of an individual?
We can have a signed complaint filed on behalf of an individual, no problem whatsoever. So if somebody doesn't even know the person, but they read about it in the newspaper and they want to make a complaint about a certain situation that they become aware of, they can certainly do that without us having to get it in writing from the person who's actually the aggrieved. So yes, that's number one. However, anonymous complaints, completely anonymous with no signature, we cannot do. What we do with those, and we receive those every once in a while, we quite frankly, if we have no way to reach back out to whoever's reaching out to us, because many times we can't, because it'll be in an envelope with no return address or something, we simply forward those to the department, to the sheriff's department or probation department, but more often than not sheriff's department, for them to be aware of it, and maybe they want to look into it anyway.
Thank you. One last question. So CLRB is a little bit obscure in the way that you'd have to really kind of navigate the system to be able to find your organization and send a complaint there. So what I imagine somebody in the city of Encinitas doing, should they like to file a complaint, would be show up at our local station and ask about filing that complaint. What are the other avenues, or how would they be directed to know the process to file with you?
First off, the community outreach that I'm trying to do to get the word out about doing that. They can go on our website. They can simply Google San Diego CLRB or San Diego Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. If they Google either one of those, our website will come up and there's an online complaint form that they would fill out and send to us. That's the only way I can think for them to know about us, because again, we really weren't publicized for many, many years. It was just kind of kept in a corner, but under the new Board of Supervisors, we have the support and to move forward and to get the word out about who we are. And so we look to maximize that potential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I also appreciate you coming today to speak to us, and appreciate all the data in your presentation. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of quick things. So you do have subpoena power now, right?
We always have had it, yes.
Okay, you always have had it. Okay.
Yes, we have.
And then you said, and I'm recalling what I thought you were saying, so I just want to repeat it, that our station used to have a lot of the percentage of the complaints, and then we stopped, most recent past have stopped having that many.
That's exactly what it looks like. Over the last 5 years, there's been a decrease. Still, over the last 5 years, your station has the #1, not by maybe 2 or 3 cases for all of law enforcement services. So all the other patrol areas. But over the last couple of years, dramatically fallen. So like I said, the reason you're still #1 technically is based on 2016, 2017 number of cases. But over the last couple of years, there's been a decline.
And so other stations have not declined. And so what is your thought on why we are declining while other stations aren't?
You know, I think at this point, the best answer for me to give you on that is, I don't know. Part of me thinks it's maybe because, well, look, obviously the #1 thing that I would think would be that the North Coastal Station, the leadership there and the deputies that are working there, there's been a concerted effort to provide great service. That's what I'm looking at. That's my #1 thought, is that over the last couple of years, that seems to be my take. The other thought I have is, well, maybe, you know, because we're not doing outreach, nobody knows we're here in that area. Maybe that's part of the reason. But I would think with those kind of numbers and the fall off, that something good has happened and something is being done correctly at North Coastal Station. At least that's what it seems to tend to look like to me.
And so, and those numbers that we're talking about right here, this is not a percentage of total. These are raw numbers, right?
Those are raw numbers. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think in a highly educated, more affluent community, there is more engagement, and there's a greater understanding of how to contact local officials and file complaints and participate in the process. So in some ways, the fact that there's more participation doesn't surprise me, but I also, you know, I think there have been increases in the visibility of really the focus on these concerns. So, you know, there are more people who are focusing in on this part of our society. And so in some ways it surprises me that it's gone down. But, you know, your suggestion that maybe we've had a change in leadership that has resulted in a change in culture, it sounds like that's what you're saying. So
it is, and again, that's just my first blush when I look at it. But keep in mind too, let's see what happens after tonight, right? Let's see what happens. Maybe all of a sudden, because I'm here and because we're talking tonight, maybe there'll be an uptick. And if that's the case, then I would obviously note that I came out and presented to the city council, and there was an uptick after that. But who knows, Mayor? Who knows? Let's see what the new trend is.
So if somebody does want to complain about something and contact your office, what is the best way that you would like to announce right here for them to do that?
They can go, the best thing to do, instead of me giving you the long-winded email or website address, is San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. Google that, or San Diego County CLERB, CLERB. Also, they can call us at 619-238-6776. 619-238-6776.
Okay, and then if they went to the station, as Councilmember Hinsey suggested, they went to the station and wanted to do it there, that they would be presented with a form and they could do that.
They would probably not. I don't believe that the sheriff's department would refer them to us if the complainant was upset and didn't feel that they were getting proper service from the sheriff's department. But the sheriff's department would not hand out a complaint form for us. They would just refer them to us.
Okay, that's interesting that they wouldn't hand out a complaint form.
To the best of my knowledge, they would not. They would refer, but there are no complaint forms there for them to give out. And perhaps, you know what, Mayor, that's an idea that perhaps now that as the new executive officer, I can reach out and see if that's something that they'd be willing to do, to hand out our complaint form. I'm not certain.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in another government agency or in a retail or in a, you want to file a complaint, or you're in a hospital, they'll give you a card and you fill out the complaint. I mean, if you're in an airport, you can fill out a complaint and put it in a box,
Right, but what the sheriff's department would do, they would definitely give them a form to fill out a complaint for their own internal affairs. They would definitely do that. But as far as for CLRB, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, any other comments from council? I don't see any hands raised. So Mr. Paul Parker, we thank you for your time, and the information you provided, and best of luck getting those numbers down to 0, because that's where we would really like them.
Yes, ma'am, we would. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so now we have oral communications.
Yes, and we do have 10. And first, I'm going to go to Nancy Perry Sheridan. She was having some technical difficulties, so let me just put her on the line. Oh, I'm still having some difficulties, so let me get her back on the line. So let's go to Chris Wade. Chris, you can start when ready, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Chris Wade. I work with young men ages 12 to 18. And as many are aware, with online school and little social life, our youth are dealing with isolation and mental health issues. And I'm very concerned that we're losing our young teens who are now using marijuana at higher rates to cope with their anxiety. Marijuana is often the first drug youth try, but often not the last. And protecting our teens from the consequences of drug addiction is a paramount concern. Marijuana products contain large amounts of THC that completely rewire adolescents' developing brains, creating cognitive changes and potentially leading to years of further addiction. When marijuana is commercialized, it normalizes the use for young people who start to think the drug is safe with no risk. We need to be careful about promoting an industry that needs to addict its customers to increase their bottom line. It's your duty and responsibility as the City Council to protect our community. Public safety and health need to be your priority, and not promoting the marijuana industry and its predatory practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to try Nancy again. Keeps kicking her off. Okay, let's go to David Derenberg.
David Derenberg. I'm on. Yes.
Yes, you can start when ready.
Thank you. I'm Dave Ehrenberg. I am a short-term rental owner in North Leucadia. I'd like to comment on your item 12.
Okay, you know what, Mr. Ehrenberg, I'll call you during that item, okay? This is oral communication. So let's move to Cynthia Cromona. Cindy? You can start when ready.
Kathy. My name is Cindy Cromona, and I moderate Encinitas Viewpoint. Mayor and Council, now that we are transitioning into the red tier, I will ask again that the Council resume in-person council meetings so that people can once again join the City Council in a participatory fashion. My inquiry tonight is directed to Council Member Joe Mosca. Joe, I emailed you and Council Member Kelly Hinsey on March 14th in regards to last week's agenda item 10A, the Cal CHA proposal. I'll repeat my email question here. Joe, I was following the dialogue around Jordan's presentation. I was gratified to hear you asking some of the hard and necessary questions. I was really surprised after you asked Mayor Blakespear for the perfectly reasonable 1-month delay so that you could get your mind around this, as well as your co-counsel taking the time to learn more about it before jumping on board so readily. And then not only backing down, but changing your vote to yes, especially after so vociferously pushing back on the issue. This begs the question, why did you vote yes on a commitment you were uncomfortable with instead of no? You would have been beaten 4-1, but it would have been on record that you thought it needed further review, which it did. Joe, Kelly has responded to my email, but I still haven't heard from you, and I still hope to do so. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And now we're going to go to Nancy Perry Sheridan. Nancy, you can start when ready.
Hi, third time's a charm. I'd like to speak to another important contribution by Scripps to our community. my active family knows that Scripps provides excellent medical care too. But did you know that Scripps provides direct support for the mental health and well-being of our local youth? Dr. Acardi, the director of the emergency department, founded and leads the Young Leaders in Healthcare Club. I work with San Diego Alliance, where I serve as advisor to the Young Leaders in Healthcare Club. For years, students in grades 9 through 12 meet once a month on the Scripps campus to learn from a number of Scripps professionals about their work, career path, and necessary skills. There are school chapters at all of our San Diego Unified High School District high schools, as well as other high schools in North County. The school chapters are created to investigate healthcare issues derived from these monthly meetings. Summer internships have been available to students as well. Hundreds of teens have been influenced by this youth club. Students have the distinct advantage when developing goals for their future, having had the exposure, understanding the process, and learning about necessary training directly from healthcare staff. Growing confidence, a sense of belonging, collaboration, as well as leadership skills are nurtured in this youth club. The program provides a real connection and has motivated high school students to go deep and wide in their long-term planning. Although the pandemic has had an incredible toll on the medical staff, the youth program continues virtually. It's just another example of the commitment and dedication of our healthcare professionals. And we're so grateful to Scripps' commitment to the well-being of our youth. And we wanted to let you know and to thank Scripps.
Great. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jedediah Stuber.
Hey, good evening. My name is Jedediah Stuber, and I wanted to start tonight with a quote. Quote, I don't feel that we need to understand every depth of everything as policymakers, end quote. Now, do you guys know who said that? It was Mayor Blakespear last week, right before she wanted a vote on cow chow. Now, I've never been much of a political person, but I feel the need to say something, even though I feel the council will not take it seriously. I'm currently watching my part of town being threatened by developers that don't care about my home. I see city council members being given seats without a vote of the people. I see you using a housing crisis to push through policies that let developers have their way with our town. I see you creating a homeless problem in order to raise taxes to fight a problem that you create. I'm watching this town be slowly pushed further into a sanctuary that will rival Portland with its drugs and crime if it continues down this path. But all of that pales in comparison to what I heard last week when the mayor made that statement. That statement made by the mayor might be the most disturbing thing I have ever heard from a politician. Your job is to understand every depth of everything before it becomes policy, so that you don't enter into bad deals that will not benefit this town. If this is truly how you feel, then I think you need to step down as mayor of Encinitas immediately. I think that the city council needs to act as respectable elected officials and hold Mayor Blakespear accountable for what she's doing to destroy this town without understanding the depth of her decisions. Thank you for your time tonight.
Next speaker is Clara Sanchez. Clara, you need to unmute your microphone. Clara, if you can hear me, you need to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you. Okay, we're having technical difficulties with Clara, so let's move to Doug Waringa.
Hi there. My name is Doug Waringa. I'm an 18-year resident of Leucadia. I want to thank you for my chance to speak tonight. As you know, La Costa Avenue is the only east to west street connecting the PCH or connecting to the PCH without sidewalks, roundabouts, or other safe mobility infrastructure, and is incredibly unsafe as is. And you all have heard that the nearby proposed high-density development projects would contribute close to 9,000 new vehicle trips along La Costa Avenue. My understanding is this amounts to about 70% more trips than present. As a result of the proposed high-density developments, including the new Alila Maria Resort and our acute lack of safe mobility in Northwest Leucadia, I've become very interested in how the city leadership is spending our taxpayer money. I reviewed several approved city projects, including the Birmingham Streetscape, and now another Cardiff sidewalk project, the reconstruction on McKinnon Avenue. I find these projects very frustrating that included in the scope of the Birmingham Streetscape is tearing out and replacing functional sidewalk. And it seems 1,200 feet of McKinnon Avenue sidewalk is being reconstructed. The stark contrast to La Costa Avenue with not even its very first sidewalk makes me wonder if we all live in the same city. Can the mayor and city council please prioritize bringing all the neighborhoods of the city up to a similar safety and mobility standard before beautifying, optimizing, and especially replacing or reconstructing existing but functional sidewalks when some very congested and frankly very dangerous residential streets have none? Thank you for your consideration.
Next speaker is Tyler McCormick. Tyler, you can start when ready.
Good evening. My name is Tyler McCormick. I'm currently a sophomore in high school, and I'm here because I think it's really important to talk about the way that marijuana is affecting the mental and physical health of teenagers. For instance, my school recently implemented Wellness Wednesdays because they noticed a huge portion of students were feeling stressed and disconnected because of the online classes and loss of normal activities. And because of this, anxiety and depression levels have been raising. And some teenagers, some of my friends even, have turned to marijuana to try and cope with that. And there's a huge misconception among us that marijuana is non-addictive and that it won't have any negative side effects. And obviously that's not true and that's false. And there are many studies showing that teenagers who use marijuana have actually reported higher levels of depression and anxiety than those of us who refrain. They're also more likely to think about suicide or to attempt suicide. And these thoughts are only exaggerated because of marijuana. And this is a side of smoking and vaping that the marijuana industry tries to hide from us. They try to make it seem harmless by putting it in colorful packaging with good tasting flavors, and they don't want people to think about the lung and heart damage caused by vaping or smoking, or the effect they can have on our mental health. If marijuana shops come to Encinitas, I hope that you'll consider a ban on the sale of products with added flavors as you have done with the tobacco. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Susan Pignatero. You need to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And thank you for your work. Hello, my name is Susan Pignatero. I am here to read a neighbor-created letter about serious health issues and ask for help in our Fox Point neighborhood. The original letter was sent to the city today by a neighbor, Joe Williams. Joe, who is not able to speak tonight, asked me to share the letter that has additional neighbor input that was received. We live in Leucadia off of Sedonia Street amongst neighbors who have, by a large majority, lived in their homes for over 20 years without illnesses that they are experiencing now and over the last year. These illnesses have culminated the last 8 months and are not COVID. You may recall some of us wrote, and I spoke at a meeting in October asking for help to identify root cause for the illnesses. Due to continued unidentified effluent for weeks after that meeting, some residents have had to again go to urgent care, emergency room, doctors, and specialists. Some have left their homes to other locations for respite from the unhealthy air. Physicians have recommended various treatments and put some of us on various medications. Other neighbors have tried to self-prescribe. We still have not received help to methodically get to root cause of what seems to be an illness cluster. Thankfully, no one has died yet upon emergency room visit and/or admission. Here is the letter. Encinitas residents in Fox Point within sight of the hemp cultivation at 1150 Quail Gardens Drive have two very serious issues that have not gotten traction to find out why they are occurring. One, residents are ill with respiratory issues that include pneumonia, bronchitis, coughing, nasal issues, headaches, hoarse voices like you're hearing me right now, and more. This has been going on for months. Again occurring for months is an unexplained smell of skunk and chemicals that is reminiscent of a burning plastics odor that is coming from the greenhouses growing hemp and directly results in respiratory issues. Are these issues from the pesticides that are used in the evenings resulting in pesticide drift, or is it the plant itself that's causing severe allergic reactions? This grower is also licensed to grow hemp across the street from the YMCA on leash tag property, which could also be a concern. I understand some other California cities have ordinances prohibiting growing hemp this close to a residential community. To date, our mayor and city officials, along with others in City Hall, have been somewhat helpful, but have continued to point the finger at other government organizations as the responsible organization to investigate. We need our Encinitas elected officials to please actively engage with our efforts to get to the bottom of the problem. Simply saying it's another organization's responsibility, notifying them, and disengaging is unacceptable. Can we please have the appropriate city person actively engage and follow up to ensure this serious health issue is addressed? Telling us there will be a development built here soon doesn't stop the current illnesses. This is supported by Joe Williams and neighbors Jackie Kim, David Decker, Jane Duray, Ruth James, Susan Pignatero, Muriel Hassel.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Meg Norton.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for letting me speak on the critical pedestrian safety situation on La Costa Avenue west of I-5. As daily walkers along La Costa to Ponto Beach for nearly 25 years, my husband and I have experienced enormous changes in the quality of our walk due to increased traffic and speeding and distracted drivers. Remember, there is no sidewalk, just a painted area of the road. Whereas in earlier years, we could look to the sky if we heard an osprey or check out the lagoon's bird life, now our eyes are constantly on the vehicles approaching us. On our return from the beach, I walk backwards to see vehicles impinging on our walking space. Often while speeding and distracted, they will stray into the bike lane with no indication of straightening their route. So we literally must be ready to jump into the ice plant or other off-road plantings should they not straighten out. How's that for a calming end of day stroll? And the situation at the intersection of Vulcan and La Costa has only gotten exponentially worse in the past few years. We're very scared by the idea of hundreds more vehicles entering that intersection from Alia Maria hotel traffic, guests, and employees, and the proposed 1967 Vulcan property and the Maria Village project. Even now, here's what we see every day. Westbound La Costa vehicles turning left, shooting the gap onto Vulcan, right in front of oncoming eastbound cars. And cars on Vulcan are taking any slight chance they can to turn right and left, often in front of speeding vehicles. We keep our distance from the intersection until we feel it might be safe because guess what? Should there be any kind of collision, we would be the collateral damage. Finally, some of you may not realize how long many of us have been involved with trying to make La Costa Avenue safe for pedestrians, both for our walk to the beach and in the past, walking to local restaurants and businesses. In searching through old emails, I found we've been involved in this effort since 2012. We've attended and spoken at council and traffic meetings and written numerous emails in every year since then. That's 9 years asking and patiently waiting for real safety changes. Painted pavement actually doesn't work to make us safer. Please start taking action before we become that collateral damage. Thank you.
Thank you. And then let's try Clara Sanchez. Claire, can you unmute your microphone?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can start when ready.
Oh, okay. Let me. Oh dear. Hi, my name is Clara Sanchez, and I have lived in on La Costa Avenue between Sheridan and Vulcan for over 23 years. I have experienced how much traffic has increased and walking to the beach has become a defensive exercise. My understanding is that the new proposed developments in our small area will increase traffic by almost 10,000 daily new vehicle trips. I appreciate that we finally have bike pedestrian separation markings on the road. However, current traffic on La Costa constantly encroaches across the bike path lanes into the marked pedestrian area, especially at the curved part of the road across from Anderson's nursery. As I walk to the beach in the early morning, I am constantly concerned with how dangerously close cars come near me. It is disappointing that a safe walking place in our beautiful area has yet to be created. I now drive to Carlsbad or Cardiff with my 3-month-old granddaughter to access a safe place to take her for a walk. I don't feel safe walking on La Costa with her. In November 2020, at a neighborhood Zoom meeting with Councilmember Kranz, the mayor told us that installing a sidewalk or a roundabout to address the traffic issues was too expensive and not budgeted for La Costa Avenue. So it's very concerning to hear about 2 Cardiff sidewalk projects. I would like the City Council to provide information so we can understand how these 2 Cardiff projects can be approved while Leucadia is still waiting for a solution to our public safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, that does conclude oral communications. And then I just wanted to let you know that Paul Parker just sent a message and he wanted me to let you know that the Sheriff's Department and Probation Department have placed CLRB's contact information on their respective websites in case anyone wants to file a complaint outside of the departments.
Madam Mayor, I'm wondering if we could actually put that information on our city's website as well.
City manager gave the thumbs up, so that sounds positive. Okay, thank you for the update. Our next, and thank you for the oral communications from residents. Our next item is report from closed session, which we did not have. So we're moving on to the agenda. Sorry, consent agenda. Do we have changes?
Yes, Mayor, we do have changes to the posted agenda. Item 8C has been removed from the agenda by staff, and that will be placed on a future agenda. And then just a reminder to all the speakers for item 12A, because of the number of speakers, we are reducing the time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes for each speaker.
I'll move the remainder of the consent calendar.
I see Councilmember Lyons trying to second it.
Yes, I'll second.
Despite being on mute.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilmember Mosca and a second from Councilmember Lyons.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to our council member initiated item 12A. I'd like to hand it over to the deputy mayor and colleague, Councilmember Shay Hinsey.
Thank you. And before we get into this, I did want to just briefly touch on the purpose of council member initiated items, which were implemented at the city in 2013, and they are intended to be used to put on the agenda an item that a council member thinks it would be helpful for the public and our colleagues on the council to have the opportunity to deliberate on. And so in order to satisfy the Brown Act, we put it on the agenda, and that way we can talk about it. It's intended to keep the challenge of trying to get an item advanced through city staff, through the city manager's office, when the full council hasn't weighed in on whether a majority of us think that it's worth expending resources on a particular item. So in this case, we put together a staff report. It's not a staff report, but a council member report. And we put in items that we had learned in a conversation over Zoom with a group of folks. And the result is I think a decent shot at discussing the most important parts of the issue related to short-term vacation rentals. And so as we've seen from the emails that we're getting, there are a lot of people that have, would like to weigh in on this. So, but understand that if the council decides tonight that we're going to move forward and get staff actively involved in helping to develop a solution or possible changes, there will be an action item. This is not an action item. And so I thought it would be helpful and important to make sure that was clear to the public. And with that, Councilmember Hinsey, I believe, would like to have the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Yes, so Tony and I have been struggling with this issue for a long time, for the 2 years that I've been on council. And there's really just such a wide spectrum of experiences with short-term vacation rentals in our city. And for us to even be able to gather information that city staff has access to, we're just asking for our council member support in being able to give staff the resources and the time and the energy to really look through the data that we have to make better decisions. So before we get into public comment, I do want to disclose some items because I've been in touch with our city attorney about my family's own interest in this matter, and then just some future thoughts to keep in mind. And that is up until about 1 year ago, almost to the day, my mom operated a short-term vacation rental, which is owner occupied. So she lives there, and there are 3 bedrooms that she would rent out. And when COVID hit, she stopped that, and she doesn't have any plans in the near term to reinvigorate her vacation rental. But early in 2021, I took title to that property, so I am an owner. And I don't receive revenue from that short-term vacation rental, but I am an owner, and my mom, if this begins again, she would receive income from that. So in the case that we do open the short-term vacation rental again, I will make that known to the public, and I'll consult with the city attorney to analyze if I have any conflicts. And if I do, I'll remove myself from decision-making at that time. That being said, in the residence where I live, we do share a property line with a short-term vacation rental that's a whole home rental. So that's not an owner-occupied rental. And prior to my time on council, it was a very problematic rental, and we had to, as neighbors, work extensively with the city to bring that one into compliance. So all of that to say that I think I've experienced the best of short-term vacation rentals in our city, as it's been a lucrative way for my mom to be able to stay in the house where she lives. And also I've seen some of the aspects of when they go wrong.
So with that, I'd like to share the screen a little bit with to give some background, brief background on the situation with short-term rental in Encinitas. So at this point, let's see here. This is a newspaper article that talks about a lawsuit that the city had filed against it back in 2010. City of Encinitas has been regulating short-term vacation rentals since about 2006. The law, as it says here, 2006 began regulating. Interestingly, back then the annual permit fee was $150 per unit, and it is still that same amount today. This lawsuit was decided in 2011, and it was decided in favor of the city. Let me show you the other thing I wanted to share is the city has on its website a short-term vacation rental screen. So here gives a graphic representation. This is on the GIS website. If you go to the city's website and look at online services, this is available. So if you're living in a house that you think is being impacted by a short-term vacation rental, you can go to the city's website and explore whether that short-term vacation rental you suspect is actually permitted. So next item I wanted to share, here's an area that I think is pretty illustrative of the challenge that we have. As you can see, this on the corner of Glaucus and Neptune, there are short-term vacation rental units that are adjacent to one another. So it's quite possible to make quite a party out of a block on Neptune. Here's an example down this lower area here. There's a duplex 1060, and the duplex is shared with a short-term vacation rental. This has presented significant problems for the duplex to the south, which is a gentleman that lives there and has to deal with the regular renters of the short-term vacation rental units. But as you can see, that whole stretch of Neptune is fairly significantly impacted with short-term vacation rentals. And one of the goals that I hope we can accomplish today is that we gives direction to staff to take a look at a couple of ways to modify our short-term vacation rental ordinance. And in our Zoom session that Kelly and I had, it was suggested that there was a law in San Luis Obispo County having to do with Cambria. And in Cambria, you can see they limit the number of short-term vacation rental units that can be licensed within a certain number of linear feet of one another. So you might find that there was a little less of the problems that you see currently on Neptune, where big chunks of city block are being taken by short-term vacation rental units. I'm also a big fan of what has been done in Carlsbad, which has, I think, a top-notch ordinance, and I hope we can get the city staff to review this. One of the things that I think is important is that the focus in their ordinance has to do with the idea of the owner encouraging the use of their property as more as a residential unit. And it's not allowed to, so it says the owner and/or owner's authorized agent will use reasonable, prudent business practices to ensure that the short-term vacation rental unit is used for residential purposes only. Commercial activities and special events, including but not limited to weddings, receptions, and large parties, are prohibited. I think that's one of the things that we see happen in Encinitas. And I acknowledge that much of the evidence that we've gathered has been anecdotal, but the parties that sometimes occur at these units are presenting some significant challenges for the neighbors that reside in the area of that short-term vacation rental unit. So other than that, I think the report asks for some specific action, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments. We've got a lot of people that are looking to comment tonight, and I'm interested in hearing the opinion of my colleagues.
Well, great. Thank you for that really interesting presentation the two of you put together. I appreciate the map, the different cities, that's just really, really interesting. So, and that article from 2010, I wasn't aware of that. We have probably about an hour of public comment because we have about 30 commenters at 2 minutes each. So let's go ahead and take those. If I don't see any clarifying questions, and then we can go to council member comments after that.
Okay, and just a reminder to the speakers, you do have 2 minutes. Our first speaker is Rich Schivey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, okay. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right and raises at first a formidable outcry in defense of custom. This custom of opening a motel staffed by no one in a residential neighborhood is apparently now a right and just custom. The city's report has failed to provide unbiased information, so I put together a website, bonzer.fun. It's supposed to be displayed now so folks can access it. As a data scientist who used to analyze data at Google that would impact hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, I'd like to think I know a little bit about data and predictions. Some examples of what other cities are doing. Minimum 15 to 30-day stays are the norm. Most of Hawaii, Boca Raton, Santa Monica, Manhattan Beach, and more have outlawed non-owner occupied completely and banned management companies from operating multiple listings. Santa Cruz, the same size coastal city, limits the number of permits to 250. It's lottery based. They also designate high density areas as no short-term rental zones, which would be most of District 2, where over 50% of the current permits are. That first link shows every city and what they do. It's very informative. Why would so many similar cities be taking such a restricted and residents first approach? Data shows there's a fundamental problem with non-owner occupied rentals, they determined, that is only fixed with strong regulation. Hosts and management companies will claim it's just a few bad apples. It isn't. Non-owner occupied is a completely flawed system and a ticking time bomb for neighbors. Hosts should not regulate their own income streams with no oversight. The proven result is long-term residents are evicted for tourists. New families can't find housing to purchase a home. Other cities like Miami are welcoming new work from home realities, diversifying and strengthening their communities with new long-term residents over vacation rentals. 3 recent home sales near Stone Steps went straight to Airbnb, run by a management company, bought by out-of-town developers who lived here. We are being overrun as all the cities around us enforce stricter laws. Please do more, and it is being done in every other city but Encinitas. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maria Greenwald. Maria, you can start when ready, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I am Dr. Maria Greenwald, my husband, Dr. Gary Greenwald. We've been in residence here since 2009. We adore Encinitas. We happen to have short-term rentals on both sides of us. And this is anecdotal, but we have watched it for many years. And our experience is exactly what the last speaker showed you. What that is, the one house which requires a minimum of a full week to many months rental has never been a problem year after year. The other side is a 1 night or sometimes 2 night rental, and it's party after party after party after party. And it doesn't matter how many times we complain, nothing changes. Both of the homes are vacant. These are owned by outside entities and rented out. The party house has had weddings, quinceañeras, all sorts of different major events, set off firecrackers, set off confetti bombs, reveal parties. Our suggestion from experience is that they need to be longer term rentals, a minimum of a week. I think 15 days sounds even smarter. That way you let visitors come to the coast. There's plenty of things to rent, but not an overnight party house. The other thing I would suggest is that you cap it at 6 adults. They can have children, but when you get past 6 adults, you're talking party. It's the frat party, it's the get-together party. There's really very little I've ever seen with the house with no problem. They always have generally 4 adults at max. And that's easier to supervise than to say how many bedrooms are in the house. The party house next to us was 4 bedrooms. They just threw partitions in it. You'd have to track all the remodeling. And they call it 8 bedrooms. And they say it's okay for 23 overnight guests. So it's definitely just a party house. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lindsay Romag. Lindsay? I do not see Lindsay, so let's move to David Derenberg.
Hello, Dave Ehrenberg. I am a owner of a short-term rental in Leucadia, and I want to speak to your desire to have minimum stays of 7 days, I believe is the proposal. And I currently ask for 7 days minimum at my home. However, what I would like to speak to is the occasion when a booking of 7 days will create a space in my calendar of 5 or 6 days. On occasion, I would like to have a booking of 5 days or 6 days to fill the calendar. Otherwise, it becomes unaffordable for me to operate. So that's what I'm addressing to you for consideration for possibility of occasional 5 or 6 day rentals. I completely support the multiple night minimum bookings for these type of rentals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Melissa DeVita. Let's see. I do not see Melissa. Let's move to Sean Feist.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can start.
Oh, great. Okay, great. As an owner occupied short-term rental host in Encinitas, we agree with all of your points except the 7-day minimum. And I will say that I now have seen that your 7-day minimum really only is for the whole house rental. Is that correct? It's not for owner occupied. Do I understand that correctly? Okay, so do you know how many of the registered 349 short-term rentals are owner occupied versus whole house rentals?
So Ms. Feist, this public comment right here is for you to give your public comment, but it's not an opportunity for us to have a back and forth.
Okay, okay, sorry.
So if you want to just use your 3 minutes to give your comments, and then afterward the council will
Thank you,
questions.
Mayor. Thank you. We believe the whole house rental and owner occupied rentals should be treated differently, as they function very differently, with the latter offering owner participation in monitoring and hosting. We are only asking for an exception to the one rule, 7-day minimum for short-term rental hosts who owner occupy at the time of guest occupancy. We host many families for shorter time periods, and this would reduce our ability to host considerably. We support the city collecting the TOT tax directly from Airbnb. We believe the city will increase its coffers that way, and will have a better idea of how short-term rentals are being booked and working in this town. This increase could possibly pay for city monitoring of the short-term rentals. We feel honored to be one of only 349 registered short-term rentals in Encinitas. We take this seriously and use this opportunity to be ambassadors to our city, beaches, neighborhoods, and state for guests from as far away as Nepal, India, China, Japan, Belgium, Brazil, and from across our country. We have hosted about 250 groups and had only one group that we needed to ask to leave due to obnoxious party behavior, as they thought they were getting into a whole house rental for partying when they booked with us. Guests who book with short-term rental owner-occupied hosts are very different from the guests who book whole house rentals. Our guests want to engage and interact with us. Most of our visitors are families who want to visit our beaches, Legoland, and SeaWorld. Our home provides them with respite far better than an expensive hotel room. They cook in our kitchen and share coffee and dinner together often.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janine Novak. Let's see, I do not see Janine on the list. Our next speaker is Kimberly Jackson.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, thanks for hearing our issue today. I appreciate it, and thanks for your service. My name's Kimberly Jackson. I'm a 43-year resident of the area, born and raised off La Costa Avenue. Learned to surf and skate on Neptune. I also run a vacation rental business called Vacation Rentals by Kimberly. I've been in operation for 11 years, and I employ a lot of local staff that live in the area. It sounds like we have a regulation problem. It sounds like there are a number of bad apples out there that probably have off-site owners that are not doing their job properly. Personally, when we get a booking, we pick up the phone and call every client and ask the reason for their visit. We want to find out if they're planning to host a baby shower, if they're planning to host a wedding, if they're planning to have college friends over and cause problems at night. We don't allow any parties or gatherings of any kind, not even a baby shower. We abide by the occupancy rules, so we clarify, you know, Mr. Smith, we see you have 2 adults and 2 kids on the reservation. Is that accurate? If it comes back and they're over the permit, we don't allow them there. We move them to a house that's larger that can accommodate a family of that size. We abide by all the rules. We instill quiet hours of 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. out of respect for the neighborhood. And when we get a neighborhood complaint, we formally go next door or wherever the complaint is coming from and gather more information, gather facts, and do something about it. We put people on do not rent lists. We show up at the house and evict them. So what I see is that we have bad management that isn't doing their job properly, and they're letting bad apples in. I would recommend that you guys have a 3-strike and you're out policy. If we have one of those currently, it's not working. Nobody's taking and pulling permits because we wouldn't have these problems if the permits were being pulled. We could shut them down and put a lien on their house if they continue acting in that fashion. I highly recommend that we start really looking at the permits. Any complaints that you guys get from a house that is not permitted, send out a letter that says if you don't cease your actions, you're going to get a lien put on your house, because we can't really track them if we don't have a permit. Once they have a complaint.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Our next speaker is Crystal Dirks. Crystal, you can start when ready, and you do have 2 minutes.
Hello, I'm an Encinitas resident, and I've lived in Encinitas for 10 plus years. We have a long-term rental on our property, and we recently converted it to a short-term rental approximately 1.5 years ago. We secured our short-term rental permit prior to transitioning to a short-term rental, and this has allowed our family more flexibility and allowed me to be a stay-at-home parent with my children. We maintain an excellent relationship with our neighbors. We screen each guest for purpose of visit, number of guests, number of visitors, number of vehicles, and have strict house rules with no parties or events. And the guests must confirm compliance with our house rules prior to check-in. I have rejected bookings if I am not comfortable with a guest. The report cites issues of rentals with chronic abuse of quiet hours and frequent large gatherings. We suggest enforcing the permits, and after X number of complaints, revoking the permit. Require owners to collect name, age, address, contact info of responsible renter, and city can impose nuisance and noise fines directly on the renter. We suggest only allowing local or Encinitas residents to hold permits for vacation rentals. Eliminate the property managers, because local neighbors have more stake in maintaining the relationship with their neighbors. We believe that owner managed should be treated differently than company managed. We agree with collecting occupancy tax through the rental platforms. We believe shorter stays should be allowed to fill gaps between longer stays. And also, I just feel that you should impose your limitations on management companies, not owner operators who want to continue to live and operate in our community. Involve local owners in your ordinance updates to provide a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Reed. Kelly, you can start when ready. You need to unmute your microphone. Kelly, can you unmute your microphone? Looks like we're having some problems with Kelly. Let's move to Caitlin Kinder. I do not see on the list. Let's go to, let's see, Kathy McCall. I don't see on the list. Peter Rodriguez.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. You can start and you have 2 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. City Council members, I live in Encinitas District 1. My daughter's a 3rd grader at Capri Elementary, and I have another daughter and son who will start preschool this year, all within the confines of the city of Encinitas. As for myself, I manage short-term rentals in the city of Encinitas. I take the responsibility of protecting neighborhoods personally as my family lives here. On the documentation that we received earlier today, it has been noted that STR has provided a little over $1.3 million in revenue in the form of taxes. There are roughly 474 permitted and unpermitted short-term rentals in the city. Beachfront only with 9 rentals accounts for 1.8 of overall rentals, yet accounts for $171,000 of taxes paid, which is roughly 13%. I would like to note that on the 1062 area that was noted by Councilmember Krantz, that property is managed by my company. Also the 1084 and 1086 properties that make up that intersection. I had exhibits that note that we have not received calls to our office from any neighbors, despite them having them, despite my cell phone number being posted at the property, despite my cell phone number being available to all neighbors, including the shared duplex. They have made no effort to find common ground with us. In fact, on the contrary, they have been somewhat harassing. I'm more than happy to provide exhibits to that effect. Beachfront only screens every guest registration information. Every guest is contacted and reminded of our good neighbor policy. Guests are often met at the time of arrival where the noise policy is reinforced. Reactively, our team is available 24 hours a day. I normally respond myself and do not send staff as I live down the street. We will continue to be available to resolve issues and respond to valid complaints. Every neighbor has been provided my personal cell phone number, as I mentioned. We do have a 2-night minimum at most of those properties, and we only limit it to 2 renters per bedroom, not 23, as Ms. Greenwald mentioned. I also manage the property next to Ms. Greenwald. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Helen Holloway.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Yes, my name's Helen Holloway. Thank you so much for your time. I have been a host and owner for, golly, the last 6 years. I haven't had one single complaint from either side of my neighbors because I do screen all of my guests. I do call them beforehand to verify guests and what their purpose of stay is. I also go and meet them on day of arrival. And sometimes I will just swing by and I'll pick up mail or I'll knock on the door and say, how are things going? I have a great relationship with both sides of my neighbors. They have my number if anything was to happen. But it is a large house and I do cater mostly to families. And like I say, I've had no complaints, no parties, nothing in the last 6 years. But I'm all for, penalizing the ones that are making this bad for everybody else. And as far as the night requirement, I think maybe 4 or 5 nights minimum requirement might work. But I don't know. But yeah, like I say, everything has been very smooth for me. It's been very financial, good for all of us, as well as the city of Encinitas paying the taxes. And it's been a win-win for everybody as far as I was concerned. But there's always those few bad apples that spoil it for everybody else.
Thank you, Helen. Our next speaker is Richard Kipnis.
There we go. Madam Mayor, City Council members, thank you very much for this time to speak. I am also an owner-occupied Airbnb host, and we've just started literally 2 months before COVID. We put a couple of $100,000 into our house in order to up the value for potential renters. Every single time we screen them, like all the other owner-occupied hosts have mentioned. We do not allow parties. I've never had any complaints from my neighbors. Moreover, COVID has changed everything for us. We planned our retirement on this. And for a whole year, we've held out for public safety. We haven't had any guests other than the first few months of the year of last year and 1 month in the summer when we the level went down, and then we closed for the rest of the year. So we're just literally getting started now, hoping that this summer is going to provide the added income for us in retirement that we planned on when we bought our duplex 10 years ago. Our property values have gone up every year, and now it's time for us to make good on the property value increase, in addition to the additional taxes we've paid on the upgrades. So I think I agree with the chorus of owner-occupied rent hosts, which would allow for a shorter term. As long as they comply, we should be allowed to earn this income and give the city taxes. I'm all for Airbnb giving you the taxes directly. I know they do that with other counties. And I hope that that would help root out the illegal Airbnb renters who also would have to give up their rental because they've listed their address in Encinitas. So all of a sudden you've gained 154 more rental income from Airbnb if you just get your compliance.
2 minutes.
Mr. Kipnis, I have one question for you.
Yes.
You said you have a duplex. Are you living in one side of the duplex and renting?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And every single time, like all the other owner-occupied hosts, I screen for how many people are going to be there. We don't allow any more than 2 in a bedroom. We have quiet hours. And we have never had a complaint from any of our neighbors. We make sure that they park in the designated parking spot, and we're respectful of our neighbors and of the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve McCarty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I have similar things to say that our last callers. My wife and I, Laura, have short-term rentals on Neptune. It's the same. It's a condo complex with 2 rentals, and we've been doing it for 3.5 years. We don't have any complaints, and for the same reasons that my counterparts are talking about. We screen, and we're mindful of our neighbors. We have house rules. And the guests that occupy our rentals understand that before they come in. We ask good questions, and we designate parking. We also have, lack of communication is the mother of most problems. And so it starts there with the guests. Then it moves on to an agreement. We have an pretty ironclad agreement, which again lists the house rules. Those again are listed inside the rental unit. And so they're reminded of this. And I guess what I'm hearing over and over again by those that are successful have no complaints. We know our neighbors, we have respectful neighbor relations, and we also have quiet hours, things like that, is a set of standards. And I would propose that Encinitas come up with a set of standards. I'm all for that, we're all for that, so that everyone can be on the same page. We can all go about it the same way. And that way, a minimum number of days is not really that relevant, because if people are respectful, like they are with our place, and we have in our agreement, they can't use it as a film set, they can't use it as an event place. They know all that going through. So those kind of standards can be, we can let you know, and you've had some very knowledgeable experts on this meeting. Perhaps you tap into them and find out, so that a set of standards can be across the board. We love paying the TOT tax. We love referring our guests to Encinitas businesses, and they take advantage of it. And we know we bring a lot of revenue, and it's our income. We're retired, and so it's the way we put food on the table. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your good work.
Next speaker is Elena Lu Torres. Elena, I do not see her on the list. Next is Tom Alper.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. So first of all, I've noticed that the community overwhelmingly is supporting not limiting these short-term rentals so far tonight. And I know Encinitas wants to be progressive in some ways by increasing low-income housing to meet state mandates on one hand, but on the other hand, they're talking about limiting and restricting these affordable short-term rentals. As we all know, public access to the coast is a primary mission of the Coastal Commission. And what we're proposing here at the 7-day minimum, the biggest problem is probably the distance between short-term rentals. I don't know how you deal with that, but seems to me that some people came up with some good ideas, some standards, and maybe a 3 strikes solution, something like that. But the big deal is average families can't afford $500 or $700 hotel rooms. And the data person before comparing us to Santa Monica and Santa Cruz, which I'm very familiar with, is ridiculous. But the data he should have given was they have 10 times more hotel rooms than we do in Encinitas. So, your average family maybe only can afford to stay for a few days. They certainly can't afford some of these hotel rooms. And so having these limits hurts locals that are struggling through the lost Airbnb rental income that happened because of COVID. And the short-term rentals encourage tourism and help local businesses. And this would hurt businesses. And so I guess in summary, if we limit and restrict short-term rentals, the only winner is a few hotel owners like Maria Beach Resort and maybe Maria Village when they have if they ever get their hotels. But it's bad for struggling locals, bad for business, and really bad for lower income people who just want to visit and access the beach. It's really a bummer for them to get rid of these things or limit them and make it so difficult for them. So
thank you. That is your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Next is Afsana Farfadi.
Yeah, let's see. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your time. I appreciate allowing me to put my 2 cents into this conversation. I own a condo in Sea Bluff community, and I've owned it for myself and hope to someday retire there and reserve it for myself over the summer to enjoy. Most of my rentals are longer term, but during the summer, my wonderful property manager take care of it. And since she lives in the community as well, along with the restriction that the community has by itself, it has been run professionally. It has been kept nicely. When I go out there and visit my neighbors, I haven't heard anyone complaining about the rental. And I really enjoy being able to share that community with people that are coming from out of town to enjoy Encinitas. I love Encinitas myself. As I said, I hope to live there someday. And I really hope that we don't restrict it more than it needs to be. I get the concerns and worries that that people have, and just wanted to share that mine has been very successful, and I can afford it so that I can actually come out and live there the last years of my life. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Karen Kremen. Karen, can you unmute your microphone? Karen, we can't hear you. Can you unmute your microphone? Okay, we'll come back to Karen. Let's go to Michael Shand. I do not see Michael. How about Sharon Crystal? Sharon, can you unmute your microphone? There you go.
Hi. I didn't really want to speak. I just wanted to be available if I needed a comment, but I agree with all of these people who have said that we have had a vacation rental in Sea Bluff that is managed quite well and no complaints, always successful. And like the woman before me, I am planning on retiring down there very soon. But Sea Bluff already has a 7-day rental, so I'm not familiar with the shorter term than that. But yes, it makes a difference for those of us who can't afford to have a place at the beach unless we're getting a little bit of income. And I hope that you don't change the rules. I just think you need to enforce the rules that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Robbie Fender. Let's see if I see Robbie. I do not see Robbie. Let's go to Anthony Tersel. Anthony, you can start when ready.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm an Encinitas homeowner since 1975, and my 1954 600 square foot house is walking distance to the beach. I would agree with a lot of what's been said, but I think what I would point out is that there are some problems there, certainly, and you have ways to resolve those problems with nuisance ordinances against noise and such. And so it seems unfair to penalize those that don't cause problems by enforcing things that will sort of tangentially perhaps cut down on some of the problems. It reminds me of saying, oh, there was a dog bite in one of these neighborhoods, so let's limit the number of dogs all through Encinitas and put a density limit. You can only have a dog every 4 houses. You really should be attacking the problems, go after the people who don't have licenses, and go after the nuisances that are being caused by parties and those types of things. And one more thing is that there will be people who will complain, and they will use noise and parking and various complaints to say that short-term rentals are a problem. But my experience is that some of those people just don't like short-term rentals, and they're using excuses, and they won't go directly to their neighbor that has a short-term rental, because in fact there may not be any problems. It's sort of like when people blame the post office for slow mail delivery when they actually haven't mailed the package. And so I'd say focus your efforts on resolving real problems and don't penalize people who aren't causing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Gonkels.
Hi, yeah, it's Sarah Gonsalves. Thanks a lot. Okay, I am looking, I'm going to reference the agenda report provided by Deputy Mayor Krantz and Councilmember Hines. In the summary of the issues, there are, and first of all, I am a Encinitas native, and I have been renting out my home since 2009, very successfully, have all retired neighbors, and I've never had a complaint, and I've had amazing families who've had amazing experiences. So it's all been very positive, but we do, have good practices like a lot of people have mentioned, and we follow all the rules in our permit that, prohibits commercial activity, gatherings, number of people, parking, trash, you name it. We have a lot of good rules in there. And in the summary of the issues, I think like everybody else, we just need to address the problem. Bullets 1 through 5 all pertain to neighborhood nuisance, frequent large gatherings, unavailable property managers, chronic complaints, nights and weekends, summer months. Bullet number 6 and 7 deals with unlicensed rentals and underreporting of taxable revenue. And then the recommendations on the following page have 6 bullets, number 1 and 2, to address the issue, which is primarily nuisance, longer minimum stays, defining the bedroom. We already do that. Neither 1 or 2 really are going to address or resolve the issue. Number 3, however, is where we need to focus on bolstering the city's ability to institute fines and oversight and enforcing the good rules that we have. Number 4, duplexes, that kind of needs to be evaluated, common spaces on whatever our policy is with condominiums, which I think it should just be in line with that. And then 5 and 6 don't really address the issue at all. They just are things that would be even more difficult to enforce than the rules that we already have. And I don't know how we would apply those fairly. So I think that it sounds like there's a lot of people with good practices and that we can do it right if we do it together.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tara Curley. Tara, you can start when ready, and you do have 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. I am a resident of Encinitas, and for the last 2 years, I've turned my guest house on my property into an Airbnb, and it's been a great experience for us. It's a place that we would have never rented out as long-term because we like to save it for family and friends when they come to town. But being able to open it up on the times that we don't have family coming to stay with us has really been a great benefit to us and also to guests that we have that come. Often we have a lot of families because ours is just it's a 1-bedroom, but it's a full kitchen. So making it only 2 people for that 1 bedroom would take away the ability for a small family to come and stay with us. So I ask that you consider that in what your restrictions are. And many of those families do come from inland areas, not too far, and drive, and 3 days is kind of all they can afford or all they can take off of work. So again, I think based on maybe the size of the place, or I don't know, I'd like you to consider not increasing it to a 7-day for especially something like a granny flat or a guest house that people often come for shorter times. Also with COVID, with doing good COVID protocol, we're expected to do a 1-day gap for cleaning and airing out the place. So 7 days would also kind of throw kind of that week off. You wouldn't hit a weekend if you had to do the 7 days if you're doing proper COVID protocol, which Airbnb likes us to do. So that being said, I definitely agree with using the Airbnb platform for collecting the taxes. It would make it a lot easier. It's always kind of a awkward thing that you have to explain that you also collect this tax outside of the Airbnb platform. So it would feel more professional if it was able to be done through the platform. And I agree with everybody else as far as, let's attack the bad apples and not penalize the people that are doing a really good job. And I hope you treat the guest houses that are similar to on property as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tara. Our next speaker is Rory Revier.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Again, Mrs. Blakeshire, go get the Senate seat for a local resident. That's very exciting. But thank you guys for devoting your St. Patty's Day to us. And local resident, born and raised, and I live in Encinitas, and I own a vacation rental company, Seabreeze Vacation Rentals, and we operate in the city. And I just want to reiterate to the council to go after the 1% that are causing the problems, and to look at the quantifying noise nuisance violations with the people that are the bad operators. As you've kind of heard in all the other comments from the other residents and operators, that it's not coming from us, it's coming from the bad apples. And we just want to continue to have you guys go after those that are not operating, that are not paying their TOT. I know the platforms have reached out to you guys to try and collect and pay on behalf of the guest to the city, and just to try and follow a lot of what Oceanside has done, and done like a 2-night minimum stay, and going back to, we are one of the more regulated cities across the coast. We manage from the border up to Malibu, and we are one of the more strict cities. And the Coastal Act does want us to have that affordable serving visitor. We don't have enough hotels, and we just want to continue to go after the people that are not following the rules and having the protocol that they are reachable and we are reachable. The buffering platform and idea is not going to necessarily work at all with the Coastal Act. So as you guys have seen in San Diego City and Del Mar, to not start to go down that road. And we're super excited. Well, thank you so much for you guys' time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Wesley Parrott. Wesley, you can start when ready, and you do have 2 minutes.
Hello, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can start when ready.
Yes, I've been a part of Encinitas my whole life. My grandmother lived in this house since before the 5 freeway was here. So we started an Airbnb to help make sure that we have enough money to pay for her to live here, and me to take care of the house and make it better for her. Especially with COVID and the way what happened, I wasn't able to work because I did trade shows. So without Airbnb, I would have lost my house by now. So that is the biggest thing. It's helped me financially keep my house and keep my 92-year-old grandmother in the house that she's owned for 60 years now. So and I have run a perfect Airbnb, never a complaint. We live on the property. So just, that's the biggest thing. It's like, as long as you live on the property, there's never a problem. So that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Let's go back to Kelly Reed. Kelly, let's try you again. See if we can. We still can't hear you, Kelly. Can you unmute your microphone? we appear to be having some technical difficulties with Kelly. I'm just going through the list, make sure nobody joined. Karen is not there. Michael is not there. Okay, that does conclude speakers, Mayor Blakespear.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. Councilmember Mosca.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Deputy Mayor Kranz and Councilmember Hensy for bringing this item forward, for the research that you've done. And I know that you've done some Zoom meetings as well. And so thank you for the research that you've done on this item. And thank you to all of the folks that have sent us emails and have reached out to us and have given testimony tonight. Your comments really help us in our deliberation. And as Deputy Mayor Kranz said, this is just the start of the conversation. They have done a council-initiated item to put this before us to see if there's enough support to move it forward by at least 3 council members, so the staff can do a bit more research and bring this back to us. So in that vein, I just want to lay out some comments for the staff to bring us back some future options. I think it was said very well by several different speakers. Focus on the problem, right? I think that's always good advice. What is the problem? And focus on that problem and try to tailor your solution to that problem. And so for me, so far, now I could be persuaded otherwise, but for me so far, the problem is really about nuisance behavior and the noise, the trash, the public drinking, the cars, too many people, no one to reach out to. I think that's something that I've heard and read many times. You know, I know that there are a lot of folks that have testified that they're actually managing the property on site, but there's a lot of testimony that we've received in emails that say that residents don't know who to talk to. They don't know who to place their complaints about nuisance-like behavior, and it continues. And then there are some complaints that residents continue to complain and nothing, they seem to feel like nothing ever gets responded to or corrected. Events, and I think I like the language that Deputy Mayor Kranz pulled out of the Carlsbad ordinance. You know, these should look, feel, smell, act like residents. They should be like a home, a residential unit, and you know, we shouldn't have businesses for the most part in a residential zoned area. And so from the exterior, in terms of the sound and everything, it should feel like a residential property, not hosting weddings and other large gatherings. I think that that's a problem from my perspective. And so I really do want to see, again, I could be persuaded the problem is other than nuisance, but I think from my vantage point, what I see right now is a nuisance issue. And so I want to see some options on how we can really make sure that residents can enjoy their property and not have to be subjected to noise, parties, trash, public drinking, lots of cars being parked there. Those are things that I want to look at. Maybe the staff at some point can answer the question in terms of whether or not the short-term vacation rentals can collect the TOT and remit it to us. I'm not sure if all of the different platforms out there can do that, but it sounds like it makes sense. And also, you know, we didn't talk about the enforcement. It wasn't, I guess it was maybe 3-4 years ago. I was on the city council at the time, so maybe it's like 3 or 4 years ago that we actually hired a company to enforce or go out there and look for folks that are short-term vacation renting and not actually pulling business licenses with our city and paying the proper taxes. And I want to make sure that we're on top of that as well, that we're, you know, we're out there looking to see if folks that are renting are pulling and paying for their business license, and that the business license is actually a good, fair price for what we actually outlay in terms of services. I don't know if it sounds like Deputy Mayor Kranz said that hasn't been changed in a while, but yet our all of our employees' salaries are going up. So we may want to look at that as well. And so those are some of the issues I'll just leave that I think that would make for, you know, some really good options when this comes back. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakes.
Wait, hold on. Did the city manager just appear because you wanted to address something that Councilmember Mosca said?
Oh, no, I was just going to say if he had wanted answers this evening, that was something we weren't prepared to do tonight, but we are taking notes to bring back, if council desires, some of these more detailed issues.
Right, and that's what, and especially regarding the questions, you know, it's a council initiated item, so I didn't want to just kind of throw some questions at you. So if you have answers to anything, you're welcome to respond, or if you just want to put it in the next staff report, that's fine too.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. I wanted to start by thanking Deputy Mayor Kranz and Councilmember Hinsey for structuring this in this way with the council member initiated agenda item. And perhaps it's because I'm new, but and you've been doing this for a while, but what I like is that we're trying to determine exactly what the issues are by engaging with the public. And I want to thank the public for really being there and giving us a lot of amazing input. So anyway, this process I think is a really good one. I want to start by saying I support short-term rentals and I support business. And I think that the rules of operation are really what the issues are, and that's associated with what Councilmember Mosca was saying is what is the problem here? Let's identify specifically what that is and how to address it. And I think a lot of it has to be with the idea of being a good neighbor. I mean, any business, we would want them to have rules of operation and we would want them to be a good business. So I just kind of, I want to kind of condense how I feel into that statement. I have heard from constituents in District 3, and one comment that seems to resonate pretty strongly is enforcement. And I think it's good for us to talk about how to fine tune our ordinance, because perhaps we can have a sharper pencil and make sure the expectations of the standards or the rules of operation are a bit clearer. But let's make sure we also vet everything to see, is it implementable and is it enforceable? And I think perhaps in our next phase of evaluating this, that we could drill down a little bit more on enforcement strategies and the costs and who's responsible and that topic. So I just wanted to make that overarching statement at this point, and let others take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lyons. Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to all the people who came and spoke tonight. We got a ton of emails as well. Appreciate you taking the time to send those. I could tell that word got out to the operators. And so we did receive today and late yesterday quite a few emails from them defending their practices and their businesses. I did notice today that there is an email from Airbnb. It was a 3-page letter from Airbnb, and they are offering to work with the city to address some of the issues that were in the report, and we're hearing from folks who live near these short-term rental units. The one thing that I took away from the Zoom session that we had, there was a woman who spoke about the experience of living near a problem Airbnb unit, and it was, as if she had a little bit of PTSD because there were just, as try as she might, there were no solutions. The phone's number that was on the permit never was answered. There was never any response. You can't call the sheriffs because they don't, this isn't something they respond to. And it really sounded like quite the nightmare. I recognize that that particular type of short-term rental unit is what, as Ms. Holloway calls, the bad apples, and they ruin it for everybody else that operates good, that it has a good business and takes pride in ownership and isn't prepared to let their guests ruin our city. And so to all those folks who came on tonight and spoke to that particular issue, I very much appreciate that. I do not live near any short-term rental units that I'm aware of because either they're run well or they're not there. I do have some people who live long-term, and a couple of them have a tendency to party a lot, and it does become a little bit irritating, but it is part of the neighborhood, and I have done my best to be a good neighbor and understand they enjoy celebrating occasionally. So if this moves forward, it is my hope that the city manager will work to establish best management practices, both for the owners of short-term rentals as well as cities and their enforcement and oversight of this particular business. I have looked at Carlsbad's ordinance, and I think that the city of Encinitas ordinance could use some updating to become similar to Carlsbad's. Someone tonight spoke, an operator actually spoke about the city of Oceanside's ordinance in a positive way, so maybe that could use some review. Somebody talked about the idea of trying to keep clusters of units from being purchased by people who want to run Airbnb units, and the ordinance that I pulled is from Cambria, and they are in the coastal zone. So I tended to focus on jurisdictions that were in the coastal zone so that we knew that they were approved by the Coastal Commission. So if we had to change our local coastal plan, which is very likely, we wouldn't run afoul of the Coastal Commission. But again, as everybody has stated, my colleagues as well, this does seem to be an issue of enforcement. And I hope that if everybody agrees to direct staff to bring us back either changes to the ordinance or changes to the way that we operate, that we're prepared to beef up the enforcement part of this. The roughly $1.5 million in revenue that the city sees because of these short-term rental POTs, I think taking a percentage of that and dedicating it to enforcement is worthwhile. And we could possibly look to implement something like we did with the alcohol serving establishments, which is to establish a deemed approved ordinance that would give the city the ability to address bad actors in a much more effective way. But again, if it's decided that this is going to move forward, the onus is on the city manager and her team. And I look forward to them bringing back something that will address as many of these issues as possible.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to thank all the speakers who showed up tonight, both those speaking in favor and those against, because it really rounds out the true picture of what it is we're trying to grapple with in the city. And also to Councilmember Krantz for articulating so many of the different things that we looked at and so many of the different city ordinances that we looked at. And I want to reassure those who called that if you are an owner-occupied rental, you wouldn't be looking at a 7-day minimum in what we have proposed. And somebody asked the question, and I'll answer it because I had the question too, that we have 68 owner-occupied rentals and then 281 whole home rentals in the city. And so I think, you know, the focus here is on owner-occupied and how to eliminate some of those nuisances that Tony and I hear about so often. And then on the issue of Sea Bluff, we had quite a few people who called about Sea Bluff, and it seems like everything's going fine there. And one of the speakers illustrated maybe why that is. And it sounds like Sea Bluff has a 7-night minimum. And so it seems like there's not much that needs to be changed in that neighborhood. And To the speaker who went through and enumerated all the different challenges that we laid out, plus all the different solutions, in the process of writing this report and then also listening to the community, Tony and I recognize that there's two kind of separate issues here we're trying to solve. And one is the enforcement, and one is something that could be achievable before the summer begins, that our staff can be empowered to sort of knock out these issues through the months that this problem is most acute, which is June, July, and August. And we realize that some of the long-term planning issues that we also have our eye on would need to be approved by the Coastal Commission, and that would take a lot more staff time and energy. And so to just kind of clarify what our goal is to have something come back to us before the summer that we can move on, but not to lose sight of the fact that as we did our research and we found out what other cities are doing, there is sort of this threshold when the genie's out of the bottle, and then it's really hard to reverse what has been approved already. And it seems to be that this fear that neighborhoods get turned over to be largely vacation rental neighborhoods. And that's what we're really trying to avoid before it becomes a problem that we can't rein in easily. And so that's just to provide a little bit more clarity for my colleagues when you're thinking about the issue as we're describing it.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to round two comments, I'm going to make some comments. So I appreciate the council members who brought this forward, and also those who called in and sent emails. This is a really complex issue, and it clearly depends on where you stand, how you see it. And to me, it seems like I'm very much in line with my colleagues in general who have said that we should focus on the bad apples. Because this really is an enforcement issue in many ways. And I also just want to mention that I think nobody is served by having black market rentals, ones that are not registering. And I think our enforcement effort needs to focus on that too, because we want to collect the TOT tax. We want them to be monitored. The neighbors need to know who they are, all of that. And we hired or took on host compliance to be checking and making sure that whenever somebody's advertising on these platforms, they are actually registered. And I haven't heard an update recently about how effective that is, but I think we need to make sure that that's a top part of our enforcement efforts, is that everybody who is using it this way is participating in the program as they need to be. But so moving on from the enforcement part, which I feel like everybody here has agreed on, the question of some of these bigger changes, like saying you can't rent a whole home. You just said there are 281 of them for less than 7 days. I don't know, I don't have a settled opinion on that, but I don't immediately arrive after this meeting as saying absolutely. And then also the issue of how many per street, or can they not be across the street from each other? That also remains an unclear thing to me. So I just want to make sure that I know there were different things that were proposed or considered. And I think, like many things, it's always about the details. And I know, when I was first elected, Councilmember Kranz and I started a subcommittee on a mediation program having to do with, neighbors who were in dispute. And there were a lot of details about how that would work and when it would apply. And, it's something that we got up and going from serving on a subcommittee together with the staff and the attorney. And we had a number of meetings about it. It was somewhat intensive work, I think. And then also we had another one on the urban agriculture ordinance, which was similarly about neighborhoods and character and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed and how's it regulated and what's the permit look like and all this kind of stuff. And so I wanted to float the idea that the two of you do serve on a subcommittee and you work with the staff so that when the next thing comes back to us, as Councilmember Lyons said, that she wants something that's implementable and enforceable by staff. And so there's, a sense of like, you're already crafting it so that it could be more likely to be successful at the council level. I don't know how you guys feel about that, because I know it's always can be easier to say, let's let the staff work on it and come back to us. But I think it might be more likely to be successful if there's a subcommittee. Those are my initial comments. And I do think we could improve things here in the city, and I'm looking forward to that, because I think we without question need to be focusing on that enforcement issue. So with that, I see the hand of Councilmember Lyons went back up.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. You really summarized my thoughts on this as well. So thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of leave one more comment associated with my earlier comments in a little more detail. I look at the recommendations on page 2 that you've put forward, and as you're thinking as a subcommittee and working with staff and moving forward, I'd like to just leave some thoughts. The longer minimum stay idea for the whole home, I think that has merit based on the public comment we've heard. Perhaps 7 days is longer than is needed. These are hard times for people and for businesses. So I do want to kind of look at it with that lens. Numbers of bedrooms are actually pretty easy to count. And, we can defer to what the definition of a bedroom is. So I can see that as, an implementable thing that could be enforced. And kind of going down the list, the one thing I want to point out that I still have a little bit of trouble with, and some of the public comment reinforced this, is creating a buffer between the properties that prevents proliferation of whole home rental in clusters. I understand why that's being brought forward. I get the reason for it, but I think it would be extremely hard to implement effectively, and also to enforce over time. So, but in general, the rest I think are really good to move forward with. So I wanted to leave you with those thoughts.
Thank you. So does the Deputy Mayor or Councilmember Hinsey want to comment on the subcommittee idea?
I'm willing to serve in that way. I think that the city manager, I think I would love to hear her thoughts on it. This would be my first involvement with a subcommittee with the city manager. And it works well. I agree with Catherine that we were able to accomplish a lot. It allows for some noticed meetings that allow the public to provide input on drafts and some ideas that we may have, so that by the time you get it back to this full city council, it's a little bit more refined. So I'm happy to serve on that subcommittee with whomever else might be willing.
Does the city manager want to comment?
I would be delighted to have a subcommittee with Council Member Hinsey and Deputy Mayor Kranz. And we have been doing a little bit of research work on this. There are some areas that would that actually are already covered in our code and our enforcement issues. I would say the number one complaint that we receive is the non-answering of the phone calls, of posted phone calls when there is a problem. But I think a subcommittee is a great idea. We can get started and start taking a look at it to bring something back quickly. I obviously took that you want to try to do something before the summer months. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll just my only concern is the fact that my mom does operate a short-term, or if she does pick up operating a short-term vacation rental, I wouldn't want everything that we worked on as a subcommittee to not be able to be implemented or considered. So maybe the city attorney can let me know if it's a bad idea that I take more part in the process, or if in 6 months my mom wants to operate again, does that just mean I recuse from that vote at that time?
That would be correct. As we discussed, when you don't have any intention of, using a property as a short-term rental, then you don't have a conflict. But now, given the ownership interest that you have in your mother's property, once there's an intention to use that as a short-term rental, you would need to recuse. So I think you need to sort of weigh that as you decide whether your continued participation in the subcommittee is practical, if you anticipate that you may have to back off.
I mean, to me, that answer makes it seem like maybe Councilmember Lyons should do it. because I mean, it just seems like it's going to create a question if you're saying right here, is your intention to do it in the future? And she's saying, my mom might intend to do it in the future. Right?
That-
I mean,
That concerns me as well. You know, I think that when we did the analysis initially, it seemed like I didn't realize that her mother's intentions were going to be in play. So that's sort of a little bit new wrinkle, and I agree with you that you know that it could be problematic. Now, if she never does, and then there wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, well, just like some of the speakers said, so much of her social life comes from operating this rental, and people from all over the world come to visit, and it's something she really derives a lot of enjoyment from, and also does gain some financial benefit from having it. So if Councilmember Lyons is willing to serve on that subcommittee in my place, I think that would just uncomplicate things.
Councilmember Lyons.
Yes, I'd be willing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's a good idea on all fronts. So do we need a motion on that, or is it, we probably should have a motion, right, City Attorney?
Yes, you do have an action item on this item here, so you should have a motion in any case.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we form a subcommittee of Deputy Mayor Kranz and Councilmember Lyons to work on vacation rental regulations.
Well, let me clarify. I'm sorry. The item itself, in terms of whether to move forward, needs to have a motion. I would recommend, though, that if you're going to do an ad hoc, that you, because if you do the subcommittee by formal action, then you've created a Brown Act committee as opposed to one that can work informally together. Does that make sense? You can, as the mayor, say, you know, indicate that there's going to be an ad hoc and here who the member's going to be. But it'd be better if you did not vote on that piece of it.
Do we need a motion, since this is we're just essentially giving the city manager direct more information to bring back an ordinance on this matter? But if we do need a motion, I'll make a motion that we direct the city manager to bring back an ordinance on this matter, or bring back some options on this matter in the future.
Second. I think also, and we'll create an ad hoc committee. I mean, they can go ahead and discuss and have a public meeting after they've worked with the city manager and they just get to a point where they want to do that, then they can do that, or the city manager can bring back a proposal. But basically we're not creating an official committee.
Correct.
Okay. So that was a second motion and a second.
Do we start voting?
Yes.
Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz?
Yes.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody who participated in this. And good luck to the subcommittee. Okay, let me get back to the agenda. I don't think we have anything else on it, in fact. So we'll call on council member reports subject to 1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody want to make any reports? No? Okay. City manager report?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Okay, city attorney report?
I have no report this evening.
Okay, city clerk report?
No report this evening.
Okay, well, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.